Hello and welcome to another edition of Conversations of the Heart. As always, it is your boy Tito. We have a very, very special guest in the building today. Friend of the show. It's been a while, but friend of the show. We have here Coach Debbi Thomas. She is a certified mindful coach and she is an author. She is a native of the Philly area. Okay, go Eagles. I mean, I guess that's what we're doing. Go Eagles. You happy? You happy from the Super Bowl? You happy? You happy?
My family's happy. I don't work, okay, but my family, if I say I'm anything else, it would be a problem. Okay.
Look, I'm from the Northeast, so I know how Eagles fans are. So I know
Terrible.
how I already know what time it is. But Coach Debbi, is an incredible wealth of knowledge. She established Haven Inspired in 2021. She is pursuing, her master's degree in counseling. She's going for the gusto. She is a wealth of knowledge. And in the social media realm, I always try to catch her lives as much as I possibly can because she's always spitting those gems that I really love. In 2020, she pursued a calling, as a mindfulness coach, right? She really dedicated herself to her purpose, right? And she's guiding individuals towards strengthening their emotional intelligence and leading a life of purpose, through her transformative practice of meditation and mindfulness. So she has an incredible practice. And I am definitely excited about this conversation that we're about to have here. She definitely empowers, her clients to really embrace their vulnerabilities and really discover their inner strength, right? And cultivate a sense of purpose. So, with that said, welcome Coach Debbi to the show again. I appreciate you for taking the time out here. And for the people who don't know you, I know I just gave you an intro, but for the people who don't know you, kind of tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, like I said, my name is Debbie. Debbie with an I, not an IE. Be specific.
Hey, be clear. Be clear.
But I primarily have like a professional background in recruiting and just really enjoyed that space and still working it full time as I'm going and pursuing school. But from that space, have just trying to slowly integrate into like working with people in a different way.
Mm,
One thing that I noticed just about my career is that each job or field that I worked in, it was dealing with people and like helping people make tough decisions. So like whether it be
mm,
recruiting, I worked in higher education for a while with helping people like pick college, pick out their programs. I worked in banking, helping people, working through financial decisions. So like
mm.
with all of that, it's always helping people make tough decisions. So I had like just an epiphany one day, like, hey, like why not just go all the way with this certification and go into counseling? So that's where
Mm.
I found myself. I'm a mom of two teenagers. Pray for me.
Hey, Black don't crack. Shout out to the
And
Black don't
just
crack. You got two teens? Two teens
two
is crazy.
teenagers,
Two teens is crazy.
17 and 15. So
17 and 15.
yeah,
Jeez.
I have a senior.
My goodness gracious.
About to be a mess, but we won't go there. But yeah, mom of two, and just enjoying life, man. A woman of God,
Hmm.
most that's top.
Mm,
Just have been working on strengthening my own emotional intelligence as well
mm,
as my strengthening my relationship with God too.
mm. I love that you're doing both. Some people feel like you can't do both. You either got to be just strengthening God and forsake everything else,
Yeah.
or you have your emotional intelligence and you don't need God. I think I always say, um, for me, my always mantra was, God and therapy. You can do both. You don't have
Yeah.
to forsake one for the other. So I'm so glad that you're doing, that work and doing it both ways because I think those are very much so important in life. Um, so when it comes to speaking of difficult conversations like that,
Mhm.
this is one of the things I want to talk about as a recruiter, and me, we're in the same field.
Mhm.
Um, and having those difficult conversations of you didn't get the job, right? Like you have to have those type of conversations,
All the time.
um, right? Also, giving constructive feedback,
Mhm.
right? And it, sometimes may not be received well, right? We have to do those things on a professional basis all the time,
Yes. Yes.
right? And sometimes it can cause us to want to pause
Hmm.
because sometimes the work gets a little weary, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
As we both
Gloom
know,
and doom.
it is, right? Which, having difficult conversations, is essential, I think, in life, right? Of course,
Yeah.
professionally, right? That's where people always say, you got to have a difficult conversation professionally. It's business, right?
Right.
But
Right. Right.
where I feel like it gets a little cloudy is when it's personal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Family,
Mm-hmm.
friends, your romantic partner, right? Your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife, whoever that is, right?
Right.
Because feelings are involved, emotions are involved,
Right.
right? So, I saw, he had a post on TikTok the other day about difficult conversations. So I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit about difficult conversations. So there's two sides to it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's the person that's, approaching the person with a difficult conversation, and then there's the person that's receiving,
Right.
right, that difficult conversation. So how do you? I'll start with family,
Mm-hmm.
right? We'll start here, family, um, because I feel like in family and culture, it's hard to have those tough conversations with elders,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Yes.
in our culture, and
Yes.
probably in a lot of cultures where it's like, hey, I need to tell this elder that I have a boundary,
Mm-hmm.
or that they're not 100% correct on something, or what you're doing bothers me,
Right. Right.
right? Right, it's a lot of those things, right? And I feel like this is a loaded topic because I think when we look at statistics, even when it comes to sexual abuse, it
Mm-hmm.
comes from family,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of those things that it's always somebody that's close, right? And sometimes people
Right.
go, "Oh, I don't want to say anything because of family." I don't,
Right. Blood is
there's
thicker than water.
difficult type
Yeah.
of conversation, right? And I didn't mean to get so deep into that part of it, but these are how things start to get to that place.
Right.
Um, so when it comes to family, um, what do you think is the best place to start to open a dialogue with difficult conversation?
Yeah. I think the best place to start is within yourself first.
Ooh.
Really like thinking about what it is you need to articulate, how you want to articulate it, what is important in the conversation and what's not
Mm,
important in the conversation.
mm,
Thinking about timing, when you bring this up, or am I bringing this up at the kitchen table, or am I pulling them to the side and having a conversation? So I think it starts with yourself and really one understanding, because I think sometimes when we go into these conversations, we just go into it not thinking about really what you want to get out of the conversation. We just go
mm,
into it because we feel obliged to, or we are emotional and we're just frustrated.
mm.
We feel like I just got to say something right now. Um, and we
Yeah.
don't go into it without any forethought. So I think it starts with the forethought of, okay, what do I want to get out of this conversation? Is it I want them to understand me? Is it I want them to, come help me to come to a solution or a resolution? Is it to attempt to at least set a boundary? Like, what is it that you're looking to accomplish before
Mm,
having conversation? And then
mm,
I say to myself is that if you can't think of of what you want out of that conversation, don't have the conversation. It's not time yet.
mm,
And then also too, the second thing to that is you don't want to go into a conversation with the attempt of trying to control the other person and what you want them to do, right?
ooh,
It's more so of like articulating, okay, this is my need. Can you meet this need? yes or no. And if the answer is no, then maybe we need to change how the dynamics of the relationship work, or how, whether
Mm-hmm.
this is even a relationship moving forward. Um, and then also, too, just remembering that you cannot control people. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just have to allow people to do what they rather do. And sometimes what they rather do
It's the bar.
is the opposite of what you need them to do. So
Mm-hmm.
it always starts with self. Anytime when it has to do with a relationship with another person, it always will start with you first.
Mm. Let people do what they want to do. I love that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when it comes to these conversations because I always feel like it's loaded with, I'm trying to find the right word. I don't know if it's, well, I wouldn't say guilt is well, yeah, it could be guilt, a lot of guilt tripping.
Hmm.
Right? It's like you don't want to have these conversations with certain people because they're, and I'll take it to the elders because the elders respect your elders, respect this,
Right.
respect
Right.
that, and I agree to a point,
Right.
right? But then it's just like when it comes to having boundaries, I feel like a lot of times elders don't know how to respect the boundaries,
Yeah.
right? It's what they feel like should be done. So when you're trying to have a difficult conversation, it can sometimes can fall on deaf ears,
Yeah.
right? But I also feel like it's important to sit down and have these tough conversations, and put everything on the table because a lot of us have family secrets,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Family things where, and I don't even mean deep secrets. It could mean something light where it's just like, hey, don't tell your brother, don't tell your sister, don't tell your cousin when I said this. Don't, like it's always this, this thing. And it's just like, no, we need to get this out in the open to
Yeah.
clear the air, right? To create
Yeah.
healthy environments, healthy boundaries. So how do you deal with people whom you may be related to
Hmm.
who don't know how to respect boundaries and don't know how to accept, right, constructive feedback?
Yeah. I feel like it always starts with the dynamic of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And because a relationship between, two siblings may be different from a relationship from, like you said, an elder, your mother, your father, or grandparent. Um, I think it starts with having the conversation, but understanding that it may not give you the response that you want, right? And once you don't get that response that you want, it's then back on you to determine how you're going to interact with that person moving forward. There may be some situations where, especially with family, that you're going to be around them no matter what, right? There may be some instances where you have family gatherings that you can't necessarily control, but it's a matter of controlling your boundaries and you sticking to your boundaries. Because sometimes what
Mm,
happens is when we get into these situations and we see the other person isn't going to oblige to that boundary that we set, then we give in on the other side. So it's more so of a matter of sticking to your boundary, even though people that are around you
mm,
aren't sticking to that boundary. Does that make sense?
mm,
And it's
mm,
like that's the hard part because sometimes it's like, oh, I'll just give in, whatever. If you want to set a boundary with your grandparent about your kids, and you're like, you know what, I don't want my kids. Don't put your hands on my babies. You know what I'm saying?
that's a thing.
That's the
That's a big
thing.
thing.
That's the thing. And it's
This
like,
gentle parenting nonsense.
we need gentle parenting or whatever. And gentle parenting, it works to an extent, but then sometimes like you have to like really just kind of not put it on you like the hands on them, but just really like have a conversation like, listen, we're gonna have to start taking some stuff away now because
Mm-hmm.
you're not doing what I told you to do, sir. Um,
Mm, mm,
but I think it just kind of goes back to you can't control what other people do. So even if you set a boundary, and they don't meet that boundary, you still have to stick to holding them accountable for that boundary,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
Don't let up, because that's where it gets gray, you know.
Mm. And you know what it is when you talked about the children part.
Hmm.
I've spoken to a lot of my friends that have children, and the interesting thing is sometimes the way that things were doesn't work now,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes people are realizing my parents can't help me,
Right.
right? Like I thought they would be able to, right? Because school is different. Um, the way people discipline is different. There's
Yeah.
regulations that are very different than when it was before,
Mhm.
right? And so it's a very fine line of like, hey, mom, dad, like, how do you parent in this climate? And they have no clue. And
Right.
not because they're bad parents, it's just because it's a different age and time to where what they did before may not work today based
Right.
off of social media, right? Everybody with cameras,
Mhm.
right? Stuff going on in schools to where guidance counselors are a lot more involved with, things, right? And it's like, well, what's going on at home? You beating your kids, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. Right.
right? And it may not, and kids tell everything, even
They do.
innocently, just like, oh yeah, my daddy spanked me and this and that. And it's just like, oh, really? Tell me
Right.
more.
Tell me
Right.
more. Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, it's so, as we're before, I know when I was growing up, there wasn't any cameras, right? Like
Oh.
when you were growing up, there wasn't any cameras and people taking videos of
Mhm.
parents disciplining their kids. Right now, you have a lot more people who will put themselves in the middle of things, right? Even when it's not their
Yeah.
business,
Mhm.
right? And it's just like, ooh, right? Like, oh, don't do that to your child. And it's just like, well, it's my child, right? No,
Right.
but now I'm gonna take my camera out and watch and show people what you're doing, whether that's like disciplining your child or whatever. Even it could be yelling.
Hmm.
Why are you yelling at your kid this loud and this and that here? Right?
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, right, you can go viral for just even speaking to your kid in an elevated tone,
Yeah.
right? Because somebody didn't mind their business or somebody wanted to get involved,
Right.
right? And it's so different. Our parents are not used to that. Matter of fact, our parents, we had teachers that was like, "Yeah, beat them, yeah, beat them."
Yeah. Yeah.
Other
Well,
parents
my
beat them. You know,
my mom doesn't like the fact that I explain myself. Like I explain things to my kids. Like she doesn't like. She's like, if you said that that's what it is, and that's what it is. And I'm like, well, no, mom. Like honestly, like if I was in their place, I would want to know why too. And a lot of times when you are able to give a child an explanation, not because they're begging you for it, but intentionally explain things to them and talk their brains off, actually, probably a lot, uh,
yeah.
and explain to them why I'm telling them to do something in a certain way. And it tends to hit home a little bit more for them, whether it be if I'm explaining it to them verbally or I'm actually showing them, like, this is what it is or this is why this is happening.
Mm,
So
that's amazing.
she hates that I do it. She's like, I don't feel like you gotta explain that yourself to your kids. It's like it's not even
But I love
but I feel like they need to understand why.
they do, and I love that you do that. And it's funny because my mom was actually did more of what you did,
Hmm.
or what you do rather, in explaining certain things. My dad hated that.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
dad, so, he from the deep south. He's like, boy, listen, you gonna do
Just do what I say.
ain't gonna be no questions about it, right? Like
Right. Right.
or you gonna get this work, right? That's just what it was. But my mom was like, nah, you gotta explain things. My
Yeah.
dad was like, I don't gotta explain nothing to
Hmm.
nobody who right. And that's the thing, and that's so interesting. Right. And that's one thing when you have that dynamic in the house, but it's another thing now socially, right? Like where back in the day, if I acted out, your mama or dad could take you outside and get that work, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Now it's like you can't really do that, right? So now enters a different level of skill of parenting that you have to figure out,
Yes.
right? Because you can't just beat your kid, right? You can't just whoop your kid all the time, like you
Right.
could back
Especially
in the
when they
day.
get a certain age. Like if they get a certain age, my
Oh
son bigger than
yeah,
me at this point. You know what I mean? Like what
I
am
mean
I
kids at your age, yeah.
Well,
I
like,
mean,
what am I
it's a little
about to
different,
do? Like, to give him
right?
a strong arm or something. Like, there's really nothing. And I think also too, providing explanation is a difference of them doing things a certain way when you're around, and when you're not around. Because you
Mm.
still make that same choice,
Ooh.
if you
Mm.
actually have an explanation as to why. Um,
Mm.
and rather than, oh, just do what I say, okay, they'll do what you say when you're around. But when it comes to you not being around, are they still going to make the same choice? And I think that's the difference
Right.
in explanations. If you really do explain why and what the benefit is for them to not
Uh-huh.
that you're telling them to do, they'll either make that same decision when you're not around, or if they do make the wrong decision, they'll see the repercussions faster. And they'll be able to see, like, oh, yeah, that's right. Mommy did tell me not to do that. And now look what happened.
Yes.
They'll be able to process the fact that this bad thing happened due to what my mama told me
Mm.
not to do. And even though
Mm.
she gave me the explanation, I still did
Mm.
it anyway. So they're able to digest that themselves.
You're
So
right. And and I think at some point, the one thing I think when it came to my upbringing, I think the one thing when my mom explained things to me, I think the one thing I started was the accountability of, oh, I don't want to disappoint.
yeah.
Right, right. Like well, it was more so like a disappointing. Like I don't
Right.
because I had an understanding of why.
Right.
Right,
Right.
versus sometimes it's like I'll take the beating because you get
Right.
to a certain point where you're like, I'll take the beating if I can do what I want.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll take the L for like 5 minutes.
Right.
Right, fine. Right, but there's no real meaning towards it. It's like I know this ain't what they want me to do. I'm gonna take the beating. Cool. Right, but I can still get to do what I want.
Yeah.
Versus, you know what? Oh, like this is if I do this, this is really gonna disappoint my parents. This is gonna disappoint my mom. It's gonna disappoint my parents. Like I probably shouldn't do this, right? Because
Right.
now I understand. I have an understanding of why I shouldn't do this,
Right.
why this is not great, right?
Right.
And then it's just like you have a different level of like I feel conviction and guilt when you understand things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus just like don't do it because I say don't do it, and if you do it, I'm gonna whoop you.
Right.
Whooping ground.
Right. I'll take it. I'll
At some
take it.
point, you get old enough to where I'm gonna take this whooping ground
Right.
because I'm going to do what I want to do.
Right.
Right? Cool.
Right.
Right? So I love what you're doing. I love what you've done. And especially with sons because sons, I think, both sons and daughters. But since you have two sons, I'll speak to sons. They
I
have
have a
that
son and a
understanding.
daughter.
Oh, son and a daughter. Perfect. Oh,
Yes. Uh-huh.
even better.
Yeah.
So one and one. So
Yes.
both
Uh-huh.
parties have to have an understanding of why,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that a level of account that increases the level of accountability, which is amazing,
Yeah.
right? Because now it's just like, oh, mom, all right, she don't want me to do this, right? But I
Right.
understand why
And
now.
you
So
and your
now,
explanations may be different depending on the child, especially in boys. Like my son, he just needs straight answers. Like he just needs like, okay, why can't I do this? Okay, you can't do it because of this. Okay, fine. My
yep.
daughter, she's gonna ask more questions and she's going
Mm,
to be a lawyer and she's going to try to defend her case. And then it's a good 10, 15, 20 minute, 30-hour conversation
mm-hmm,
about this one
mm-hmm,
thing. So it's like
mm-hmm,
some kids need more of an explanation than others, but
mm-hmm.
just understanding. I think we tried to do like one clear cut solution of parenting for all of our children.
Yeah.
All of our children have different needs, and it's like
Mm,
my son, he's pretty straightforward. He's like, okay, mom, I got it. And then my daughter, she gonna try and she gonna argue. But she's
yeah.
gonna argue in a very she knows how to talk to me. So she's like, okay, mom, okay, take your voice down. You getting a little too loud now. Take that out your throat.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But just there's still a respect factor, but also just understanding that, and not just with kids, just in people in general, all are going to need an explanation differently, and especially when it comes to family, there's certain ways that you have to talk to someone. So like when you're
Mm,
having an explanation with your mom about something is going to be a lot different than an explanation that you would have with your sister. So
mm-hmm,
it's like
mm-hmm.
when I talk to my sister, I talk to her just like two bickering sisters about stuff. But I wouldn't
Hilarious.
I wouldn't talk to my mom that way. I'm like, okay, mommy, like, listen, okay, so got an idea.
Here's the idea. All
This
right.
is an idea. I'm just gonna run it past you really quick. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
So
I
yeah,
like that, and I think growing up, I was the negotiator. Like, I understood why she didn't want me to do something, but then I was like, hey, let's have a conversation about why I
yeah,
think I should do it. Right? I'm just like, well, let me tell you why I should do this.
yes. There's a lot
Can
of
we,
pros and
can,
cons
and
and
can
things.
we come to the middle or something?
My daughter would do a PowerPoint like she.
You sound like that. She sound like somebody. It sounded like me when I was younger. And I was just like, "Wow, look, here's why I should." Can we
Mhm.
negotiate this problem? But my dad was like, "Yeah, no, what we talking? Like, we're talking. Like, and if we talking, then there's something wrong. Like, uh, but I do love what you're doing, and also it works out muscles with kids where now they can have these conversations, not just because I think I have the conversation with you, they can have a
Yeah.
conversation with anyone,
Right.
right, in terms of just having this conversation of, well, okay, I see what you're saying, like, well, let me say my piece, and like,
Right.
let's do that,
Right.
right. I love that. um I always feel like difficult conversation saves families.
Hmm.
um
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
know, because I always feel like secrets, and when people push things to the side, right, to save face, or to keep peace,
Hmm.
right? I think problems don't get solved; they compound.
Hmm.
They snowball into
Hmm.
bigger problems, right? And then there's no accountability anywhere,
Yeah.
right? So, um, and then because I feel like they're trying to prevent someone from receiving constructive feedback,
Hmm.
right? Which nobody
No.
likes constructive feedback, right?
I,
Whether it,
well, I'll say
well, they do. I
kind of.
do.
I do. I
I
do
do
like
too.
constructive feedback as long as it's coming from a place of care. And
Yes.
even though, and one thing I had to learn too is that even if it's not coming from a place of care, you can still learn from it.
Mm.
You ain't got to tell them. You ain't got to tell them, but you can still learn from it.
Mm.
So I'm learning like constructive feedback in a professional setting. I've always been fine with, but it was constructive feedback in
Mm.
my personal life that I was like, I don't like that. So, so I think it's just a matter of like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable when it comes to difficult conversations, whether it be feedback or just difficult conversations,
Mm.
because that's how you're able to grow. That's how you're able to get better.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't any growth without there being some type of pain. When there's growth,
Mm.
form of pain that happens. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so being uncomfortable for that 15-20 minute conversation could be a lifetime's worth of growth. And so
Say that.
so it's just a matter of just getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And
Mm.
sometimes you just have to get, for me, I had to intentionally put myself in uncomfortable situations to get more comfortable with it. And
Yes.
that's what avoidance prevents you
Ooh.
from doing. And it's like, even if the difficult conversation is the people at the counter that got your order wrong, and you go up there and you're like, hey, I asked for no onions. That was
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to do. I don't want to mess with nobody that cook my food, okay?
Yo, me. See, that's where we're here. Yo, look, I don't mess with nobody. I don't mess with no restaurant workers.
No. Mm-mm. No.
Hey, listen, I just want my food. Like,
Right. I'll pull them off. Listen, but I
that's
but
it.
I started actively. That was something small that I felt comfortable with doing, which is a
Mm.
little bit more difficult. That some people find really difficult. Another thing is I didn't like getting on the phone with people at all. I got on the phone with people for work. When I got home, if I got a call to make a doctor's appointment, whew,
Mm.
that's a long. I put it off. I don't know why, But like just putting myself in these small, easy, uncomfortable
Mm,
small situations that I found uncomfortable
mm.
make it more comfortable for me to do the bigger
Yeah,
stuff, you know?
yeah,
So, I mean, it's
I
different for
love that.
everybody, but like just it takes practice, honestly.
Mm,
So the other way to get practice is to ask for feedback. Ask people for feedback. You know,
mm,
because
mm,
I'm like, well, they may have a hard time telling you, but the more you ask for feedback, the more difficult conversations you'll be in, and that will give you practice of receiving constructive criticism.
mm.
So
I like that. I think because when it comes to, like for me, I think the biggest form of constructive, well, I say one of the biggest forms of constructive criticism is when you go to therapy. Like when
yeah.
you voluntarily put yourself in that position,
Mm-hmm.
right, for somebody to show you a mirror of who you are, it's like, right, like,
Gotta be ready. Hmm.
I ain't as cold as I thought I was.
Right.
I ain't like I thought I was. You thought you was the guy. You thought you was the woman. You thought you was on. Right? Until somebody shows you, like, nah, like you're not.
Right.
You got work.
Got some work to
You
do.
got a lot of work to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? You could be cold in your career, making
Right.
money, but relationally you suck.
Yeah.
Right? Or vice versa. Like, oh, like you good relationship, but career wise you suck.
Yeah.
Like you need work. It's like, oh, you making money, but your communication skills are horrible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Like, and to hit, and when you have to hear those things, and when you put yourself, like you said, in that position voluntarily to hear whatever feedback that is, that's how you know you want to grow.
Yeah, and the more that you put it in voluntarily, when it comes involuntarily, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
big of a gut punch when someone involuntarily gives you constructive feedback, or if you find yourself like, hey, you get that ping, like, hey, got a one-on-one in about an hour, and you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Mm-hmm.
So like that unexpected feedback won't hit as hard when
You're
you
absolutely right.
really putting yourself in these situations.
Yeah, because like I already know. I
It's a
know.
part of life. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
a part of life. Our lives are made up of just feedback, criticism, communication. That's our lives. So the more that you're, open to it and ready to have those conversations, the easier it will be when it
Mm.
comes to those difficult times.
Man, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And then
Um.
you set up for what your responses will be. Because I think about all of the time where it's like when I'm in constructive criticism or just difficult conversations, like, okay, if it's too much to me, if it's too overwhelming to me, what would I say? Let me practice that, you know?
Mm,
Just it gets you into that mode. So that way when it comes, it just happens instantly instead of you trying to think on your feet. Because sometimes we just don't want to be embarrassed.
that's a
That's
fact.
the fear. We just don't want to be embarrassed. Don't embarrass me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is.
And so when it comes to, but also because as you were talking, my wheels were just going because when it comes to like that, getting that constructive criticism and stuff like that, it's like the person who receives it now, like I said before, when it's a therapist, right, versus it coming from a relational standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Because when it's the therapist, I don't have a rebuttal to a therapist,
Right.
right?
Right.
The only thing that you could really do is like, I'm not going to therapy anymore. Bye, right?
Right. Right.
See,
Cancel my appointment.
but when you have somebody across from you who is
Yeah.
also imperfect, right?
Hmm.
Now you have the opportunity to kind of say, so you pointed this out at me.
Hmm.
I'm not going to receive it, but what I am going to do is flip it on you and tell
Right.
you about yourself. Oh, so you don't like I do this? Well, you know what? I don't like
Hmm.
this.
Right.
Right? Like you have that opportunity now to do that.
Right.
Right. And so I find that when that's where that unhealthy communication comes and that pride. that
Right.
ego, right?
Right.
Where because now you're no longer receiving it. It's like, oh, you just said it to me. Now.
Mhm.
This is my opportunity
Right.
to get at you,
Right.
right? And so I find that's a lot of times of these things happen in in these like I would say non-platonic
Mhm. Mhm.
relationships, right?
Mhm.
Because it's very emotional and nobody wants to hear that they're not doing a good job,
Right.
right? So it's like,
Right.
well, shoot, if I ain't doing a good job, neither are you. Let's
Right.
talk about
Right.
you,
Talk about
right?
you, right?
Which causes now more problems and more strife, right? Because even
Right.
if I know, because I think people know what they do. Oh, I know I
Mhm.
ain't that cold with this. I know I ain't that good. Well, she ain't that good with this, or he ain't that good with that. So I'm just gonna just flip it, right?
Right.
So how important is it, right, to have those intentional pauses
Mhm.
to receive,
Yeah.
right, what somebody's saying, right, instead of just responding and being flippant, right? So first, one, let's get grade school here. What is an intentional pause, and
Yeah.
how is that important and impactful for our lives for us to grow?
Yeah. So an intentional pause is basically you noticing something within yourself that is off, right?
Mm,
So whether it be you feel exhausted and you don't understand why, or you are having a tough time navigating your day, or you are in a state where you're just really short with people, you're easily irritated or agitated, you're it's hard for you to concentrate or focus, or like there's so many different reasons as to why you would find yourself like at a pause. I would say even if you have feelings of like burnout, or if you feel stuck, I talked about that often, or just recently, about just feeling stuck. An
mm,
intentional pause is a time for you to sit and ask yourself some questions.
mm,
What's changed? What's happening? What am I feeling? What am I emoting?
mm, mm,
What's changed around me? What is going on with my environment? What's impacting me? What's not impacting me? Really, it's more so if you find yourself in that fight, flight, or freeze response or fawn response. Um, that's where you would do an intentional pause to recalibrate.
mm,
It looks different depending on what's happening, but it's really intentional, right? To actually stop and just say, something's wrong. I need to explore what's going on.
mm-hmm,
So, whether that be through journaling, through prayer, through you taking the time to really just examine yourself, self
mm,
reflection,
mm,
just to kind of get a good understanding of what's happening. Because I think what
mm,
happens is when we don't do intentional pauses, we avoid. And we end up in these very difficult, having these very difficult emotions, whether it be depression, whether it be just extreme anger. We fall into guilt, we fall into shame, we fall into so many different things. So
mm,
it's just a way of being able to catch it, to have that
mm.
pause.
And I think, the one thing I think I've tried to learn, I think, especially with my experiences with, I think the opposite sex, especially, I think is it, intentional pausing, a little different, but just because I think sometimes what I've learned is people sometimes say things to you. They have outbursts. They have things um, that's not even about you.
Yeah,
It's about the day,
just crazy.
right?
Hmm.
Or something else that happened in life, and then you're the first person that they kind of they let off on, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So whew, so for me, I've just gotten better at this, coach. The last couple years of my life,
Mhm.
right? Because my initial instinct is if I felt right? Like there was disrespect there. If
Mm-hmm.
I felt that, you were coming at me and not from a genuine place, like, for me, I can take constructive criticism. I can't take disrespect.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always been my thing, right? So if I felt like you disrespected me, there was no intentional pause.
Right. Right. Right.
I was on go.
Right.
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 Like in my rebuttals, there was no, when they go low, we go high. Now like my man Shannon Sharp said, yo, when they go low, I go to the basement.
I go.
I
Oh,
go
oh,
all the way.
yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
And having to understand that doesn't help anybody. Right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
I will not be a doormat. Now be
Right.
clear.
Right.
Like, so if you
Right.
see me out there, understand I'm better, but I ain't all the way. So
Right.
please, I'm saying this now as a disclaimer. I'm better, but don't
Yeah.
try me. Right. I'm just
Right.
saying,
Right.
I do a lot of intentional pauses,
Yeah.
right, with people because I give a lot of grace, right?
Mhm.
Because I understand that people are going through things, they're experiencing things, and there's traumatic things going on. So I do give a lot of grace. I do these intentional pauses for my response
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
my responses sometimes are a little different.
Yeah, well, you want to respond versus react. So a lot of times we're reacting, but we're not actually responding. And
Mm,
there's difference. And then also, too,
mm,
I know that can matter, and this is just with men in general, where respect is very important. But then there's also this level of respect where people may have different understandings of what respect is. Sometimes it's subjective. And even though some people may overstep their boundaries on purpose, but then some people may overstep their boundaries and not even notice. So,
very true.
there's still that element of, they may have grew up in a house where all they did was yell. Right. And so now they're going into a relationship and they're yelling. That other person may see that as disrespect because they didn't come from a family that did that, or they came from a
Mm,
family that did that. And then now they're like, okay, I don't like that. I don't want that in this home or this relationship. So now they see
hmm
disrespect. Whereas the other person's just like, well, this is just what we do. We just yell at each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. Right. And I think a lot of
So,
times you're right. And when that happens, I know
yeah.
for me, when I was younger, it was more so like I was scorched the earth. Like
Hmm.
once I feel like you've disrespected me in a way, I'm
Yeah.
scorching everything. Everything is burning. Like
Yeah. Be
it's
red.
it's over at this point, right? Because I'm like, don't get it twisted. I'm nice, I'm cool. Like I love peace, right?
Right.
But then it's like once it gets to a place and I scorch earth. So for me, it's like, you know what? Now I do practice those intentional pauses in for me because I felt like I need to work in that within myself.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's also too, you got to understand, a lot of times our nervous system is programmed to do that. So it's just a matter of retraining our nervous system that, hey, I'm okay. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
our nervous system has its different parts, but it has the sympathetic nervous system is where you buck up, right? That's the part that's where you fight. Like, okay, your body is just doing what it's trained to do.
Mm,
It's for you to be able to flee or for you to protect yourself. So it's just your nervous
uh-huh.
system telling you to protect yourself. You have your parasympathetic nervous system that tells you to calm down, right? Like, oh no, we not in any type of danger right now. We cool. Go ahead and calm down, right? The thing
Uh-huh.
with the nervous system is that it can't tell whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat. So if your
Mm,
body is perceiving something as a threat or disrespect or something that you need to protect yourself, your body is going to automatically go into it, even if it is not a real threat. So,
right.
so this is just a matter of you've gone through life where your nervous system is storing all of that memory of this
Uh,
being a perceived threat, right? And so now you have to retrain it to say, hey, that ain't a threat. Okay,
yeah.
calm, calm,
Mm-hmm.
calm, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
It's not even just a mental thing. It's a physical thing where your body is actually be retraining itself and adjusting itself to what you're trying to teach it to do, you know?
That's powerful. And you're right because and I just use myself as an example, just because also I think for me now, my biggest thing is what is the root cause of
Mhm.
what you just said, right? So it's like, so if you come at me a certain way, my intentional pause goes, okay, Terrence, don't do what you want to do.
Right,
Don't do that, right?
right, right,
Pause.
right,
What is the root cause of where what they're saying is coming from,
right. Why is it
right?
creating that response? Yeah.
Right. And is what they're saying about me, or is it about something else that has happened in life
Mhm,
today?
mhm.
Right. And what is the root cause of that? Because if you could find that out, then you might not take things so personal, and you might realize they're reacting out of their own trauma, things like that. And you
Yeah.
might can address the situation in a much more healthier way,
Right.
right? Because before was I scorched earth. Now it's not even about what they said. It's about
Mhm.
how I reacted. Right.
Right.
And then now we're just going this back and forth about nonsense at this point, right? And it doesn't make any sense. Well, you did this, well, you did this, well, I don't like what you said. Well, I don't like what you said. Well, and we're not getting to any root causes of the problem. I think
Right.
now I'm in a place of what is the root cause of what happened here? And if it is with me, what's the underlying problem? But if it's
Right.
not, I want to know that too, right? So we can try
Right.
to figure this out. And I found that a lot of times, if when I go that way, you'll get more apologies too, where it's like, you know what, man, T, like, I'm sorry. You like
Yeah.
that wasn't even me. That was from my manager. That was from my family. That was from some nonsense that happened earlier. Like, and I just threw it on you, and I apologize. Like, normally, I've realized with that intentional pause creates a lot of accountability, because when I don't return the energy, it creates a level of conviction
Yeah.
in the other person, and it's like, my bad, dog. Right?
Yeah.
Versus the
Yeah.
other thing that I used to do, where I was like, wow, you want
Right.
smoke?
Right. Right. It's ready to
I'm,
go. But
I'm
also too, it's like it's about a lot of our subconscious core beliefs about ourselves. And
mm,
sometimes when we have these certain beliefs about ourselves that are either subconscious or it may be conscious, but it's something that we're working on, right? Like if you've gone through life with that, with low self-esteem, or if you've gone
mm,
through a lot of guilt or a lot of shame, and a lot of
mm,
times disrespect in itself is like maybe I've accepted disrespect in the past and I don't want to find myself there ever again. So now when I feel disrespected at the slightest bit, I'm going
yes.
off. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So it's like
mm,
it can be more so about these subconscious or conscious core beliefs within ourselves about ourselves. And when
wow.
that stuff starts to come up, then it's like, oh, I have to defend myself. Some of us are used to
Mm,
having to defend
mm.
ourselves throughout life, where it's like, oh, I have to defend myself all the time. So when you're
Yep.
used to defending yourself, you can't stop defending yourself. So there's so many factors that go
Yep.
into it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more so of just becoming aware of what are the things that I believe about myself
Mm,
and
mm-hmm.
whether they're good or bad, and
Yep.
then digging into it. Like for me, I just for the longest time felt I was not smart. I'm like, I am not intelligent. I'm just not intelligent at all.
Look
And
at you now.
I told myself, like, hey, like I can't go back to school because listen, you ain't smart enough to get through a master's program. Okay.
Wow. Wow.
That's the things that I would tell myself. But now that
Mm.
I am in my master's program 3.8, thank you.
Hey, hey,
Okay.
3.8. Be
It
clear.
ain't just one class either.
Multiple classes.
Multiple
3.8.
classes. So
Let's not get it
it's
twisted.
about, it was a core belief that I found about myself that I was like, okay, now let me prove myself wrong. Like,
Mm.
core belief I have about myself. Let me find a way to X that out. And that's kind of
Wow.
where I'm at now. Why I told myself I wasn't smart, it wasn't even necessarily that I wasn't smart. It's because I was undiagnosed with ADHD. I had
Mm,
ADHD. It's something that I had that all my life. And now that I come to this conclusion, I'm like, girl, you smart. It's just you learn different.
right. And now look at you,
Now,
3.8,
you know?
3.8, soon to
Yeah.
be 4. I
So
already
it's
know
just,
what time it is.
yeah, it's about self discovery, you know? And
Mm,
the more self discovery you do, the easier it will be in these types of situations because now
right.
you know yourself. Now you
Mm,
really know yourself. And I think because we have these false ideologies of who we are,
mm,
we make decisions based off of those ideologies that aren't true anyway. And so that's
mm.
why we end up in these difficult situations.
Wow. Wow. I love that. So one, I know you gotta get out of here. But for the people who don't know, tell them how they can follow you. Tell them what new stuff you got going on. I know you 3.8, but what else you got going on? You know what I'm saying? Tell the people where they can get the book. Give them everything.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, everything. So on you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. All at Haven Inspired. So HAVE
Yeah.
inspired with the D on the end. You can find my book, Nah Self, Let Me Be Great, which is an inspiration and self help workbook, more for self worth workbook. You can get that on Amazon.
Yeah.
Just type in Nah Self and it pops right up. NAH self. And
Hmm.
you can find me, what else? Primarily on YouTube. I'm posting a lot of my meditations on YouTube. I
Mm.
do lives on YouTube every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, so you can check those out. And then all of them are saved there. Or you can go to my website at haveninspired.com to sign up for the newsletter. Or if you're looking to book someone for mental wellness workshops, I'm starting corporate workshops that I've been doing at some companies where you
Hey,
can do mindfulness in the workplace. We
love
do
it.
constructive feedback. Receiving constructive feedback is one of those ones that you can do in
Love
corporate.
that.
So if you're looking for someone to come and do some workshops, that's another thing you can do on my website.
I love that. Please book Coach Debbi
Yeah,
ASAP. Grab the books. Follow, subscribe. She does a lot of meaningful work on mental wellness. I support it. I support her. Anything that she does. She is, like I said, she is a wealth of knowledge. Drops a lot of gems.
I try.
Super smart. 3.8. Be clear, right? So
Oh, let's
she
go.
listen. Listen. She about to get that master's and be on
Yeah.
your head. You know what
Yes.
I'm saying? So the price will go up.
It's
Understand that.
already creepy.
Yesterday's price is not going to be tomorrow's price. Believe
Yes.
me.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So book her now while you can. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Book her now because at some point you ain't going to be able to book it without spending some bands. You know what I'm saying?
Listen.
So
Listen.
we already know what time it is. But Coach Debbi, I really appreciate you taking the time out to be here, dropping gems on my audience. And I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Conversations of the Heart. As always, it is your boy T Till. We'll see you next week. Peace.